Now, it goes without saying that practically every movie ever made leaves the overwhelming majority of its filmed footage on the cutting room floor, as the director and their editor trawl through all the material to find the very best takes. Unless you're Clint Eastwood, in which case that first take, it's good enough. As a result, actors typically don't know which of their takes are going to be used for the final cut, as may leave them very surprised or disappointed when they finally sit down to watch the completed movie for themselves. I'm Ewan, you're watching What Culture, and here are 10 movie takes actors didn't expect to be used. Number 10. Don't lose your dinosaur. Step Brothers. Let's kick things off with one of the funniest and most memorable scenes from any comedy movie of the last 20 years. Near the end of Step Brothers, Robert, played by Richard Jenkins, encourages his son Dale, of course played by John C. Reilly, and stepson Brennan, again played by Will Ferrell, to embrace their inner child, offering up an analogy that, as a child, he always wanted to be a dinosaur, and you know what? Same. However, his father eventually told him to put down childish things, causing him to, quote-unquote, lose his dinosaur. At which point Robert tells the pair, don't lose your dinosaur. It's an absurd yet hilarious sequence, and yet one which wasn't actually in the original script. During a 2018 interview on The Rich Eisen Show, Richard Jenkins revealed that filmmaker Adam McKay simply told him to tell Reilly and Ferrell that he wanted to be a dinosaur as a child. Though Jenkins didn't really understand the request, he nevertheless complied, ad-libbing a whole-ass monologue. Once McKay called cut, though, Jenkins assumed that the monologue simply didn't work and wouldn't see the light of day, only for McKay to promptly inform him that it would absolutely end up in the movie, as indeed it did. Number 9. This is Sparta! 300. One-liners don't get much more iconic than King Leonidas' WWE-worthy utterance of "This is Sparta" in Zack Snyder's 300, moments before Leonidas kicks a messenger down a well. In a 2019 interview with GQ, Butler revealed that the shouty take was a last-minute, off-the-cuff thing. After shooting many takes of the scene, most of them performed in a low, monotone growl, Butler decided to swing for the fences with a totally over-the-top, full-throated take. This left Butler's co-stars laughing, and when he asked Snyder whether the take was too much, he responded, "Yeah, but it was awesome." Butler evidently wasn't taking the take terribly seriously, and the response from both the other cast members and Snyder himself surely left him assuming that it wouldn't actually be used. But alas, it was, and a statuesque moment in movie history was born. Number 8. But why male models? Zoolander. Talking of unforgettable one-liners, Zoolander has a killer one. As Ben Stiller's Derek meets up with former hand model J.W. Pruitt, played by David Duchovny, he asks him, why male models? Pruitt then explains the entire political conspiracy around brainwashing models, and at the end of his monologue, Derek again asks, but why male models? Pruitt incredulously responds by asking Derek, you serious? I just told you that a moment ago, capping one of the funniest and most memorable exchanges in the entire film. As perfectly, brilliantly dumb as Derek's one-liner is, it was actually totally unplanned on Stiller's part. He genuinely forgot what his next line was supposed to be, and so deferred to his previous line. But a quick-thinking Duchovny rolled with it and responded in a plausible, hilarious way. Kind of like the Ben Stiller equivalent of when Peter Falk fell down that hill in Columbo and then everyone just rolled with it. Sorry, I'm a big Columbo guy. I had to get a reference in here somewhere. Regardless, ultimately, Stiller, who also co-wrote and directed the film, decided to use this botched exchange in the final cut, something neither himself nor Duchovny could have surely appreciated while they were performing it. Number 7. Like a pig. Whiplash. The scene in Whiplash where jazz instructor Terrence Fletcher, an Oscar-winning J.K. Simmons, chews out drummer Andrew Nyman, played by Miles Teller, is absolutely legendary, and culminates in the vile moment where Fletcher tells Nyman, if you deliberately sabotage my band, I will F you like a pig, which, Someone clearly had deliverance on the brain that day. It's a shocking line, and one which Simmons, of all people, certainly didn't expect to hear in the movie, as the story of its inclusion goes all the way back to the original Whiplash short film, which Simmons also appeared in. In the short, Simmons was supposed to say, "Gut you like a pig," but ended up saying the more crude version by accident. And filmmaker Damien Chazelle liked it enough that he used the quote-unquote mistake instead, much to Simmons' actual confusion. And then, during the shooting of the feature film, Chazelle tried to persuade Simmons to say the R-rated version of the line again, though he decided not to, assuming that Chazelle would have no choice but to use his cleaner version. But the filmmaker ultimately decided to take the F take from the short and bring it into the movie, managing to blend it effortlessly into the new footage, something Simmons surely never saw coming. Number 6. Zenk walks over a rock. Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. One of the funniest moments in Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves occurs when Paladin Zenk Yendar, played by Reggae Jean Page, takes leave of the group, and the camera lingers on Zenk as he walks into the distance. As Zenk walks off, Edgim, played by Chris Pine, comments on how Zenk walks in a purely straight line, and as he speculates on what will happen when Zenk walks into the rock, the Paladin just keeps walking, stepping on the rock and over it. But this wasn't actually a planned moment at all. Directors Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daley revealed following the film's release that they simply held the camera on page and didn't call cuts, waiting to see what the actor would do without any direction. Goldstein said, quote, "We had no idea how Reggae would handle the rock, and the fact that he hopped over it was so hilarious to us that we knew we had to include it." Page was just rolling with the punches though, and surely didn't expect to see his silly bit of physical ad-libbing in the theatrical release. Number 5. Ripley sinks a basket. Alien Resurrection. Love it or hate it, and I'm decidedly in the former camp here, because how can you not look at Brad Dourif talking about how much he loves the Xenos in this movie and not have a huge smile on your face? Alien Resurrection has a brilliant moment where the Ripley clone nonchalantly throws a basketball backwards over her head, sinking it in the basket right behind her. It's such a perfect moment that viewers couldn't be blamed for assuming it was achieved via VFX trickery, or in fact a Texas switch, with a crew member dropping another ball into the basket from above, given that Sigourney Weaver's ball disappears from the top of the frame when she throws it. But no, Weaver did genuinely sink this shot, and better yet, she did it on the first take, much to the amazement of the entire cast and crew. And nobody was more unable to hide their excitement than Ron Perlman, who quickly turned to the camera and said, "Oh my god." This caused Perlman and the crew to fear that he had inadvertently ruined the take by breaking character immediately after the ball swished through the basket. But after director Jean-Pierre Jeunet reviewed the footage, he saw that there was just enough of a pause before Perlman's outburst that the shot could still be used. Amazing. Number 4. Mia slips over. The Princess Diaries. If you've seen The Princess Diaries, you'll probably remember the scene where Mia, played by Anne Hathaway, slips over while walking on the high school bleachers. It feels like a perfectly natural part of the scene, and yet Hathaway revealed back in 2020 that this was technically an outtake which director Gary Marshall just decided to use anyway. As it turns out, it had rained in San Francisco the day that the scene was being shot, and though the crew wiped the bleachers down for safety, everything was being rushed because they were quickly losing light, meaning the scene had to be shot ASAP. And so, as Hathaway took to walking across the bleachers, she genuinely slipped in a puddle that hadn't been mopped up. Yet Marshall found Hathaway's subsequent laughter endearing enough that he refused to throw the take away and use another one, much to Hathaway's surprise. In the interview, the actor went on to praise Marshall for his willingness to embrace spontaneous, unplanned moments that made his movies all the better. Number 3. You're gonna need a bigger boat. Jaws. The moment in Jaws where Chief Brody, played by Roy Scheider, tells Quint, a brilliant Robert Shaw, that you're gonna need a bigger boat is one of the most quoted and parodied in cinema history. It also wasn't a part of the shooting script for Steven Spielberg's seminal blockbuster, but came about as a result of the film's famously chaotic production. The cast and crew had many difficulties shooting on open water, chiefly that the support boat being used to steady the barge carrying the crew's equipment wasn't big enough to properly do the job. According to co-writer Carl Gottlieb, this resulted in the cast and crew adopting a catchphrase throughout the shoot: "You're gonna need a bigger boat." This caught on enough that Roy Scheider even made attempts to improvise the one-liner into the film itself. And while it's fair to assume he never actually expected Spielberg to acquiesce, ultimately his use of the line after the shark emerges behind him was successfully included, resulting in one of the most iconic moments ever committed to film. Also, it's Jaws' 50th birthday this year, so happy birthday, Jaws! You're one of the best movies ever made, and I love you. Number 2. Everyone! Leon. No single moment from Leon the Professional is more memorable than the downright unhinged scene where villainous, corrupt DEA agent Stansfield, played by Gary Oldman, tells one of his cronies to bring him everyone, which he promptly shouts at full volume in elongated fashion. It's often cited as a prime example of overacting in cinema, though there's at least a reason for that. Oldman never intended for it to end up in the final cut of the movie. In a recent interview with The Late Show's Stephen Colbert, Oldman revealed that this was effectively a gag take, which director Luc Besson liked enough to unexpectedly include in the film proper. Basically, Oldman recorded a few quote-unquote regular takes without explosively shouting, but in an attempt to make everyone laugh, he decided to dial it up for this one take. Oldman insists to this day that it was, quote, just an outtake, it was just me having fun. And number 1, comedic Turgidson, Dr. Strangelove. And finally, we have indisputably the ultimate example of an actor's work being unexpectedly used in the final cut of a movie. For his role as General Buck Turgidson in Stanley Kubrick's amazing Dr. Strangelove, the legendary George C. Scott wanted to play Turgidson totally straight and serious, in sharp contrast to the movie's general absurdism. Now, this clashed with Kubrick's vision for the character, and so, according to the late great James Earl Jones, who made his screen debut in the film, Kubrick hatched a plan to effectively trick Scott into giving a more over-the-top, outwardly comical performance. Kubrick seemingly accepted Scott's vision for the character, but also asked the actor to perform goofier quote-unquote practice takes before giving his proper performance, under the guise of warming up for his more severe, stern takes. Scott accepted, unaware that Kubrick craftily intended to use the sillier warm-up takes in the movie itself, as he ultimately discovered. This reportedly upset Scott enough that he vowed to never again work with Kubrick, a promise he resolutely kept, which is a shame given his performance in the satire masterpiece is genuinely hilarious.